What if the silent, colossal sentinels of the Giza plateau are not tombs, but something far more mysterious? What if the sands of Egypt conceal not just the history of the pharaohs, but the legacy of a civilization so ancient its very name is lost to time? Tonight on Slumber Expeditions, we journey to the Giza plateau, to the very edge of recorded history, to confront one of the most enduring and controversial questions of the ancient world. We will gaze upon the three great pyramids, those iconic tombs of the pharaohs, and ask a simple, yet profoundly disruptive question. What if everything we think we know is wrong? What if the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids? Our exploration will take us deep into the mind-boggling precision and scale of these structures, examining the logistical and technical nightmares that conventional explanations often gloss over. We will survey the landscape of alternative theories, from lost civilizations to advanced ancient knowledge, weighing the evidence that suggests these monuments may be far older than the Fourth Dynasty, that they may, in fact, be the legacy of a world that vanished beneath the sands of time and the waters of a forgotten age. This is not a search for easy answers, but a journey into the heart of a mystery that has captivated humanity for millennia. So before you settle in, if you're finding comfort in these ancient mysteries, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, but only if you genuinely like what we do here. We would also love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to connect with a global community of curious minds who share this fascination with history's greatest enigmas. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's speculative journey together. Let the silence of the desert and the stones guide you into a story of forgotten origins. You are standing on the Giza plateau at dawn, the cool desert air sharp in your lungs. The rising sun behind you begins to paint the eastern face of the Great Pyramid in a soft, golden light, its shadow stretching like a vast, dark finger across the sands. Before you stands not just a pile of stones, but the very symbol of ancient Egypt, a monument so deeply woven into our understanding of history that its identity seems unquestionable. According to the orthodox Egyptological narrative, this is the tomb of the pharaoh Khufu, built around 2580 to 2560 BCE as his colossal stairway to the heavens. This story, taught in schools and repeated in documentaries, is a compelling one. It tells of a powerful God King mobilizing the entire resources of a state, of tens of thousands of skilled workers laboring for decades in a national project of unparalleled ambition. It is a story of ramps and sledges, of copper chisels and stone hammers, of a society so organized and driven by religious belief that it could achieve the impossible. This is the narrative we have inherited, a story that places the pyramids firmly within the known trajectory of Egyptian cultural and technological evolution, from the simple mastaba tombs to the stepped pyramid of Djoser, and finally to the geometric perfection of Giza. It is a comfortable, logical, and seemingly complete story. But as the sun climbs higher and the full, staggering immensity of the pyramid becomes clear, so too do the first, quiet whispers of doubt. The sheer, overwhelming physical presence of the structure begins to challenge the simplicity of the tale, inviting us to look closer, to question deeper, and to wonder if the truth might be far more complex and mysterious than we have ever been led to believe. The foundation of the standard narrative rests upon a few key, but often misunderstood, pieces of evidence. The most direct is a single small piece of graffiti. In the relieving chambers above the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, 19th century explorer Colonel Richard Weiss discovered quarry marks painted in red ochre, including a cartouche, a royal nameplate, that appeared to spell the name of Khufu. This discovery, made under controversial circumstances that some argue involved forgery, has become the linchpin of the entire Orthodox chronology. It is the primary reason we attribute the Great Pyramid to this specific pharaoh. Supporting this is the discovery of a small, rough, and unfinished diorite statue of Khufu, the only confirmed three-dimensional likeness of a king, which demonstrates he was a real historical figure. The nearby pyramids of Khafre and Menkaure are similarly attributed based on their placement within the Giza necropolis and the associated mortuary temples and boat pits. The Sphinx, though its dating is hotly debated, is traditionally linked to Khafre, completing the familial set. This narrative is further supported by the archaeological remains of the workers' village at Giza, which show evidence of a large, organized community capable of supporting a massive construction project, complete with bakeries, breweries, and infirmaries. It is a coherent, interlocking story built on decades of Egyptological scholarship. The proposed construction methods are a testament to human ingenuity, but they also stretch the limits of plausibility to their breaking point. The most widely accepted theory involves the use of a single, massive, straight ramp or a spiraling ramp built against the side of the pyramid. The logistics are staggering. To build a Great Pyramid's estimated 2.3 million blocks, each averaging 2.5 tons, workers would have had to quarry, shape, transport, and set one block every 2 to 3 minutes for the entire 20 to 30-year reign of Khufu, working 10-hour days, without a single day of stoppage. The ramps themselves would have required more material than the pyramid, and their construction and subsequent dismantling represent a project of almost equal magnitude. The precision involved is another layer of complexity. The pyramid is aligned to the four cardinal directions with an error of just 3/60th of a degree, a feat of surveying that seems almost supernatural. The base is level to within less than an inch across its 13-acre area. The stones are fitted together with joints so tight that a razor blade cannot be inserted between them. This is not the work of brute force. It is the work of master engineers possessing a profound understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and geomancy that, according to the conventional timeline, appears suddenly, is executed flawlessly on the largest scale imaginable, and then is just as suddenly lost, with later pyramids being smaller and of demonstrably poorer construction quality. This peak and decline model is one of the most puzzling aspects of the pyramid story. If the 4th dynasty Egyptians under Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure possessed this flawless, advanced engineering knowledge, what happened to it? The pyramids that follow, built by subsequent pharaohs, are visibly inferior. They are smaller, often poorly constructed with rubble cores, and many have collapsed into ruin. The knowledge of how to build on such a scale, with such precision, seems to have vanished almost overnight from the Egyptian architectural repertoire. This is deeply anomalous in the study of human technology, which typically shows a pattern of gradual accumulation and improvement, not a sudden, brilliant peak followed by a precipitous and permanent decline. It suggests the possibility that the knowledge was not developed internally by the Old Kingdom Egyptians, but was perhaps inherited, borrowed, or applied from an external source, a source that was later lost or inaccessible. The Giza pyramids stand not as the beginning of a tradition, but as its inexplicable, unrepeatable apex. Furthermore, the evidence for the pyramids as tombs is circumstantial and strangely absent of the very thing one would expect to find: a body. No royal mummy has ever been discovered in any of the Giza pyramids. The so-called sarcophagus in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid was found empty, its lid missing. There are no hieroglyphic inscriptions on the walls of the main chambers, a stark contrast to the lavishly decorated tombs in the Valley of the Kings from 1,000 years later. The funerary complex around the pyramid, including the mortuary temple and causeway, certainly suggests a funerary purpose, but it does not conclusively prove that the pyramid itself was built for that purpose. It is possible, as alternative theorists suggest, that the pyramids had a primary function that was not funerary, perhaps astronomical, geophysical, or energetic, and that the pharaohs of the 4th dynasty simply appropriated these pre-existing, immensely powerful structures for their own burial cults, adding the temples and causeways to integrate them into their own religious landscape. This would explain the lack of internal decoration and the absence of bodies, while still accounting for the later Egyptian association of the site with death and the afterlife. The standard narrative of the pyramids, therefore, while forming the bedrock of mainstream Egyptology, is a story riddled with paradoxes. It relies on a single piece of graffiti for its primary attribution. It proposes construction methods that, while theoretically possible, demand a level of continuous, flawless execution that defies practical experience. It presents a technological trajectory that spikes to an impossible height and then collapses. And it identifies the structures as tombs that lack the fundamental evidence of a burial. As you stand there on the plateau, the morning sun now fully illuminating the colossal, silent forms, the official story begins to feel less like a solid explanation and more like a fragile scaffold built against an immense and enigmatic reality. The stones themselves seem to hold a secret, a truth that predates the pharaohs, the hieroglyphs, and the very civilization we credit for their creation. The question is no longer how they were built, but why and by whom. To understand the mystery of the Great Pyramid, one must first understand the stone from which it is born. The Giza Plateau is not a random pile of sand. It is a geological formation composed of a specific type of rock known as nummulitic limestone. This stone is itself a fossil, formed from the compressed skeletons of countless nummulites, ancient, coin-shaped foraminifera that lived in a vast, shallow sea that covered the area tens of millions of years ago. The pyramid builders exploited this natural resource, quarrying the majority of the pyramid's core blocks directly from the plateau on which it stands. This is a logical, efficient choice, and it forms the basis of the conventional construction story. However, when we look closer at the specific stones used and their precise placement, a more complex and puzzling picture begins to emerge, one that suggests a level of material science and selective quarrying that challenges simple explanations. The real geological enigma of the Great Pyramid lies not in its core, but in its casing and in the construction of its deepest, most robust elements. The pyramid was originally encased in brilliant, white, polished Tural limestone, quarried from the east bank of the Nile. This stone was chosen for its fine grain and ability to take a high polish, making the pyramid shimmer like a colossal jewel in the desert sun. But even more significant are the stones used in the interior chambers and passages. The king's chamber, the heart of the structure, is built entirely from massive blocks of granite, a stone infinitely harder than limestone. This granite was quarried at Aswan, over 500 miles up the Nile. The blocks themselves are monumental. The ceiling is formed by 9 granite beams, each weighing an estimated 25 to 40 tons. The so-called sarcophagus in the chamber is a single, hollowed-out block of Aswan granite, with its dimensions and workmanship suggesting it was carved from an even larger block. The logistics of quarrying, transporting, and precisely positioning these gigantic granite components represent a challenge that, for its time, seems almost otherworldly. The precision of the stonework is where the orthodox narrative meets its most severe test. The fit between the stones, particularly the granite blocks in the king's chamber and the relieving chambers above it, is not merely good. It is exemplary of a technique that should not have existed in the Bronze Age. The joints are so precise that they are often described as machine-like. The surfaces are flat to within a few thousandths of an inch, and the corners are sharp and true. This is not the work of stone knappers with copper tools and stone hammers. Copper, the hardest metal available to the Old Kingdom Egyptians, is too soft to effectively work granite, which is a 6.5 to 7 on the Mohs scale of hardness. Experiments with reconstructed copper tools show that they become blunted and useless after just a few inches of cutting into granite. The conventional explanation involves the use of abrasive sand, quartz, with saws and drills, a slow, laborious process. However, this does not adequately account for the speed, scale, and incredible precision achieved. The evidence on the stones themselves suggests something more advanced. There are drill holes in granite artifacts from the period that show a feed rate, the speed at which the drill bit advanced into the stone, that is identical to modern diamond-tipped drills, implying a technology with immense, sustained pressure and cutting power that we do not attribute to this era. This evidence of advanced stoneworking is not confined to the pyramids alone. Scattered throughout Egypt, and particularly at pre-dynastic sites like Saqqara, are artifacts that display a similar, anomalous level of skill. The most famous examples are the granite boxes found in the Serapeum of Saqqara. These are massive, precision-made sarcophagi carved from single blocks of hard stone like granite and diorite. Their surfaces are flawlessly flat, their corners perfectly square, and their interior corners are sharply radiused, as if made by a tool that could cut in multiple axes simultaneously. The tolerances are, again, machine-like. Egyptologists attribute these to the New Kingdom, but their style and the mystery of their creation remain. The technology required to produce such objects, a technology of saws with jeweled teeth, of core drills with immense torque, of lathes for turning huge stone vessels, is simply not reflected in the archaeological record of the tools we have found. It is a ghost technology, evidenced only by its magnificent products. The selection and transportation of these specific stones reveal a deep, almost intuitive understanding of material properties and structural engineering. The use of massive granite for the king's chamber was not an aesthetic choice. It was a structural necessity. The chamber is located deep within the pyramid, and the weight of the masonry above it is colossal. The granite, with its immense compressive strength, is the only stone capable of withstanding such forces without collapsing. The builders knew this. They also knew to construct a series of 5 relieving chambers above the king's chamber with massive, gabled granite ceilings to distribute the weight away from the chamber ceiling. This is sophisticated, counterintuitive engineering. The transportation of the 70-ton granite blocks from Aswan is another feat that stretches credibility. They would have been loaded onto barges during the Nile's annual flood, floated downriver, and then dragged to the plateau. The organization, the woodworking for the barges, the rope making, the coordination of thousands of laborers, it all paints a picture of a civilization operating at the absolute zenith of its capabilities, yet leaving behind no detailed records of how these miracles of logistics were actually achieved. When we piece together the geological story of the Giza pyramids, we are left with a profound disconnect. We have a society that, according to the standard model, was using relatively primitive tools of copper, stone, and wood. Yet, the evidence in the stone itself tells a different story, a story of impossible precision, of the mastery of incredibly hard materials, of a logistical prowess that would be impressive even today, and of a scientific understanding of materials and forces that seems to appear out of nowhere. The stones of Giza are not just silent sentinels, they are a testament. They testify to a level of workmanship that the traditional tools and methods cannot satisfactorily explain. They stand as a permanent, physical question mark, challenging us to reconsider the capabilities of their builders and, perhaps, to consider the possibility that the hands that laid these stones were not the hands of the pharaohs we know, but of a culture lost to the deep recesses of time, a culture whose technological achievements we have only just begun to recognize in the enduring, enigmatic stonework of the Giza plateau. Lying at the feet of the Giza pyramids, its lion body stretched out in the sand and its human head gazing resolutely towards the east, the Great Sphinx presents a mystery that is, in many ways, even more profound than that of the pyramids themselves. According to Orthodox Egyptology, the Sphinx was carved from a leftover knoll of limestone during the reign of the pharaoh Khafre, around 2500 BCE, making it a contemporary of the Second Pyramid. Its face is said to be a likeness of the king himself. This attribution is based largely on its proximity to Khafre's Valley Temple and a single, heavily weathered, inventory stele from the 26th dynasty that mentions Khafre in relation to the Sphinx, a text written thousands of years after its purported construction. For a long time, this was accepted without much debate. But in the 1990s, a radical new hypothesis emerged, one that did not challenge the who, but the when. This theory, most famously proposed by geologist Dr. Robert Schoch and supported by others like John Anthony West, argues that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure tell a story not of wind and sand, but of water, a lot of water, falling over a very long time. And this simple geological observation threatens to tear up the entire timeline of ancient Egyptian civilization. The core of the geological argument is straightforward and based on observable, physical evidence. The Sphinx is carved from the bedrock of the Giza plateau, and around it lies a deep, trench-like enclosure. The walls of this enclosure, and the body of the Sphinx itself, show clear, undulating, and vertical fissures of erosion. This is not the sharp, streamlined erosion caused by wind-blown sand, which acts like a sandblaster. Wind erosion tends to carve horizontal features, leaving hard layers protruding and undercutting softer ones. The erosion on the Sphinx and its enclosure walls is distinctly subsurface water runoff. It is the kind of deep, channeling and rolling erosion caused by heavy, sustained rainfall saturating the rock and then running off in sheets and streams. This type of weathering is familiar to geologists from regions with temperate, wet climates. The problem is that the Giza plateau has been hyper-arid for the last 5,000 years, since well before the time of Khafre. The last period in which Egypt experienced a climate wet enough to produce such rainfall-induced erosion was the Neolithic subpluvial, which ended around 3000 BCE, and even that was not necessarily intense enough. To create the deep fissures seen on the Sphinx, some geologists argue, would require a climate more like that of the early Holocene over 7,000 years ago, or even earlier. The implications of this are staggering. If the water erosion hypothesis is correct, the Sphinx cannot be a 4,500-year-old creation of the Old Kingdom. Its core structure would have to be much, much older, potentially dating back to a time when the Sahara was a green savanna, a period that ended between 800 and 5000 BCE. This would push the origin of the Sphinx back by thousands of years, into a pre-dynastic era that mainstream archaeology considers pre-literate and pre-urban, a time of simple, Neolithic farmers. The idea that a complex, monumental sculpture of this scale and sophistication could have been produced in such a context is, according to the conventional view, impossible. It would force a complete rewrite of the origins of civilization in the Nile Valley, suggesting the existence of a sophisticated, organized society capable of monumental sculpture long before the first pharaohs of the first dynasty. Unsurprisingly, the Egyptological establishment has mounted a robust defense of the orthodox dating. Their primary counterargument is that the erosion can be explained by a combination of factors. Wind erosion, the chemical weathering of the limestone from halite, salt, crystallization, and occasional but heavy deluges that can occur even in arid regions. They point to the poor quality of the Sphinx's core limestone, which is highly porous and fractured, arguing that it is particularly susceptible to exfoliation and spalling from these processes. They also challenge the methodology of the geological analysis, stating that it is difficult to definitively separate the effects of wind, chemical, and water erosion on such an ancient and complex structure. The debate is highly polarized, with geologists and archaeologists often talking past one another, one side pointing to what they see as clear physical evidence, the other defending a chronological model built on decades of archaeological context. If the Sphinx is indeed far older than Kafir, then the relationship between it and the pyramids becomes deeply mysterious. The traditional view is that the Sphinx, the pyramids, and the associated temples form a single, cohesive funerary complex from the 4th dynasty. But if the Sphinx predates the pyramids by millennia, this relationship is inverted. It would mean that the Giza plateau was already a sacred site, marked by a colossal, leonine guardian, long before the first pyramid was ever conceived. The pharaohs of the 4th dynasty would have been building their monuments around a pre-existing, venerated artifact. This would explain certain architectural oddities, such as the seemingly haphazard and non-parallel walls of the Sphinx temple, which is built from limestone blocks that appear to have been stripped from the Sphinx enclosure itself, blocks that show the same classic water erosion patterns. It suggests a cycle of construction, ruin, and reconstruction, with the Old Kingdom Egyptians being the inheritors and restorers of the site, not its original founders. The mystery of the Sphinx's age is the gateway to a much larger and more profound possibility: the existence of a lost, pre-pharaonic civilization in the Nile Valley. This would not be the dynastic Egypt we know from history books, but a precursor culture, perhaps one that was maritime-based, that possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and stoneworking. This civilization, the theory goes, built the core of the Sphinx and potentially the foundational layers of the Giza site. Then, a climatic shift turned the Green Sahara into a desert, and this civilization collapsed or migrated, its memory fading into myth. Thousands of years later, the emerging Egyptian state stumbled upon these colossal, ancient ruins, incorporated them into their own cosmology, and claimed them as their own. The Sphinx, therefore, is not just a statue, it is a potential relic from a lost epoch, a stone sentinel holding the secrets of a world that vanished before history began. Its weathered flanks are not just scars of time, they are a geological clock pointing to a past so remote it challenges the very foundations of our understanding of human development. As we conclude this part of our journey into the mysteries of Giza, we like to extend a special thank you for listening. If you're finding comfort in these ancient explorations, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Slumber Expeditions. We would also love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to connect with our global community of curious minds. You can also share which part of the story has captivated you the most so far. It would be wonderful to start a conversation around it. Now, let the mystery of what we've uncovered so far settle in your mind as we prepare to continue our exploration. The true purpose of the Giza pyramids may extend far beyond the realm of tombs and into the domain of high science, suggesting the architects possessed a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos that rivaled our own until the modern era. This theory posits that these structures are not sepulchres for the dead, but colossal stone calculators, an ancient library of astronomical knowledge written in geometry and alignment. The evidence for this is not found in hieroglyphs or papyri, but in the precise positioning of the stones themselves, a silent language of mathematics and celestial observation that speaks across the millennia. When we shift our perspective from funerary complex to observatory, the entire Giza plateau transforms from a necropolis into a three-dimensional, monumental clock, calendar, and star chart of breathtaking complexity and accuracy, a testament to a civilization deeply in tune with the rhythms of the universe. The most fundamental and undeniable astronomical feature of the Giza pyramids is their near-perfect alignment to the four cardinal directions. The Great Pyramid's base is oriented to true north with an error of just 3/60th of a degree. This precision is extraordinary and would have required an understanding of spherical trigonometry and the ability to make consistent, precise observations over long periods. The conventional explanation involves sighting on a circumpolar star, but maintaining this accuracy over the vast base of the pyramid during construction would have been a formidable challenge. This alignment is not an aesthetic choice. It is a functional one, anchoring the entire structure to the fundamental axis of the planet itself. It suggests that the pyramid was conceived not just as a building, but as a geodetic marker, a fixed point on the Earth's surface intimately connected to its rotation and place in the solar system, a concept that implies advanced knowledge of the Earth's shape and its relationship to the celestial sphere. The celestial correlations become even more profound when we examine the layout of the entire Giza complex. The three main pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure are not arranged in a straight line or a perfect square. Their arrangement mirrors the alignment of the three stars of Orion's belt in the constellation of Orion. This Orion correlation theory, popularized by authors Robert Bauval and Adrian Gilbert, posits that the pyramids are a terrestrial map of this celestial region, with the Nile River representing the Milky Way. The match is not perfect, but it is strikingly close, and it corresponds to the position of Orion's belt around 10,500 BC, a date that intriguingly predates the orthodox timeline by thousands of years. This correlation suggests the possibility that the plan for the Giza site was conceived in a much earlier epoch, a Zep Tepi or first time spoken of in Egyptian mythology, and that the physical construction, or perhaps the final phase of construction, was merely the execution of a blueprint laid down in deep antiquity, a blueprint written in the stars themselves. Beyond Orion, the pyramids and their associated shafts point to other key celestial bodies. The so-called air shafts, emanating from the king's and queen's chambers in the Great Pyramid, are not ventilation shafts, as their name implies. They were sealed from both the inside and outside. Their function was clearly symbolic or observational. The southern shaft from the king's chamber pointed directly to the star Al-Natak, the central star of Orion's belt, around 2500 BC. The northern shaft from the same chamber targeted the circumpolar star Alpha Draconis, the imperishable star that never set, around the same period. The southern shaft from the queen's chamber was aligned with the star Sirius, associated with the goddess Isis, while its northern shaft pointed to the star Kochab in the Little Dipper. These are not random choices. They are deliberate alignments with stars of supreme religious and cosmological significance, suggesting the pyramid was designed as a machine to channel the spiritual energies of these celestial bodies, or to serve as a physical gateway for the soul of the pharaoh to ascend to the imperishable stars, a concept that blends practical astronomy with a profound metaphysical worldview. The internal geometry of the Great Pyramid itself encodes mathematical constants and astronomical measurements. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height is very nearly 2 pi, incorporating the transcendental number pi. The structure's dimensions also relate to the golden ratio, phi, a proportion found throughout nature and considered aesthetically and mathematically harmonious. While some Egyptologists argue these relationships could be coincidental, The sheer number of them makes this statistically unlikely. Furthermore, if one takes the pyramid's height and multiplies it by 43,200, the result is the polar radius of the Earth. Its perimeter, multiplied by the same number, gives the equatorial circumference of the Earth, with an error of less than 1%. The number 43,200 is not random. It is a key precessional number, being exactly 1/5 of the 2,160-year cycle of a single zodiacal age within the Great Year, the 25,920-year cycle of the precession of the equinoxes. This suggests the builders were not only aware of the Earth's spherical dimensions, but were also tracking the vast, slow wobble of its axis, a discovery not confirmed in the West until the time of Hipparchus in the 2nd century BCE, pointing to a level of scientific sophistication that is deeply anomalous for its time. If we accept the premise that the Giza complex is a monumental astronomical device, then its function becomes the subject of intense speculation. It could have been a giant calendar, marking the solstices and equinoxes with shadows and light shafts. It could have been a precessional clock, its alignments designed to mark the slow transition from one astrological age to another over millennia. More esoteric theories suggest it was an energy-generating device, harnessing telluric currents from the Earth and cosmic energies from the stars, with its specific geometry acting as a resonator or amplifier. The complete absence of hieroglyphic inscriptions inside the main chamber supports this idea. A machine does not need instructions carved on its internal components. The sheer investment of labor and resources becomes more understandable if the pyramid served a vital, ongoing function for the state, perhaps regulating the agricultural calendar, predicting the Nile's inundation, or serving as the central, unchanging reference point for a complex, star-based religion, rather than simply being a single-use tomb for one man. The Giza plateau, under this celestial model, transforms from a city of the dead into the beating heart of a civilization's understanding of time, space, and humanity's place in the cosmos, a legacy in stone whispering of a science we are only now beginning to fully comprehend. The roots of the Giza mystery may not lie solely in the sands of Egypt, but in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean and the realm of global cataclysm. This hypothesis posits that the pyramids are not the product of a known, historical civilization, but the scattered, surviving legacy of a culture that was lost to a world-shattering event, the legendary civilization of Atlantis. This idea, first suggested by Plato in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, has long been dismissed as philosophical allegory. Yet, when viewed through the lens of geology, climatology, and the global distribution of megalithic sites, it transforms from a myth into a compelling, if highly speculative, historical hypothesis. The theory posits that a sophisticated, seafaring civilization existed during the last ice age, a civilization that possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and agriculture. This culture, often associated with Atlantis, was supposedly destroyed in a series of catastrophic events: rapid sea level rise, volcanic activity, and perhaps a cometary impact around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the Younger Dryas period. The survivors of this cataclysm, so the theory goes, scattered across the globe, bringing their knowledge with them and seeding the sudden rise of complex societies in places like Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, Mesoamerica, and the Nile Valley. The geological evidence for a major global cataclysm at the end of the Younger Dryas is robust and widely accepted in the scientific community, though its cause is hotly debated. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth, which was emerging from the last ice age, was suddenly plunged back into a 1,300-year period of glacial conditions known as the Younger Dryas. This event coincides with the extinction of dozens of species of megafauna, like the mammoth and the mastodon, and the disappearance of the Clovis culture in North America. One leading theory, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, suggests that a fragmented comet or asteroid struck the Earth's ice sheets, causing massive flooding, wildfires, and a nuclear winter, effect that disrupted global climate. This period of rapid environmental change and rising sea levels would have been catastrophic for any coastal civilization. The flooding of vast continental shelves, such as the Cinder Shelf in Southeast Asia and the land bridge, known as Doggerland in the North Sea, would have erased countless archaeological sites, creating a massive blind spot in our understanding of human prehistory. It is within this missing chapter of human history that proponents of the lost civilization theory place their hypothetical advanced culture. The connection to Giza lies in the potential dating of the Sphinx and the core of the pyramid complex. As explored in the previous chapter, the water erosion on the Sphinx and its enclosure suggests a date of origin in a much wetter period, potentially aligning with the end of the last ice age. If the Sphinx is indeed 12,000 years old, it would stand as a monumental relic of this pre-cataclysm world. The astronomical alignments of the Giza complex to 10,500 BCE further support this timeline. In this scenario, the Giza plateau was not built by the dynastic Egyptians, but was a sacred site for this lost Atlantean civilization, perhaps a central observatory or a spiritual center. The survivors of the cataclysm, who settled in the Nile Valley, would have preserved the knowledge and the site, eventually leading to the flowering of dynastic Egypt. The Egyptians themselves spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden age when the gods themselves walked the earth and established the principles of civilization. This, the theory suggests, is not mere myth, but a cultural memory of this lost precursor civilization. This hypothesis also provides a potential explanation for the technological leap evident at Giza. The ability to work granite with machine-like precision, the knowledge of advanced mathematics and spherical astronomy, the logistical genius to plan and execute such a colossal project. These skills appear suddenly in the archaeological record with the Fourth Dynasty. The lost civilization theory posits that this knowledge was not developed from scratch, but was a recovered or preserved legacy. The pyramids, then, are not the first attempts of a burgeoning civilization, but the last, magnificent efforts of a dying one, or the determined work of its heirs to recreate the glory of their ancestors. This would explain why the peak of pyramid building technology occurs at the very beginning of the tradition and is never replicated. The reservoir of knowledge was finite, and once exhausted, it was gone forever. The later, cruder pyramids are the attempts of the native Egyptians to emulate structures whose original purpose and method of construction they no longer fully understood, a pattern of decline consistent with the loss of a foundational source of information. Critics rightly point out the lack of smoking gun evidence for a global, advanced Ice Age civilization. No cities have been found on the now submerged continental shelves, though underwater archaeology is still in its infancy. The theory relies heavily on interpreting mythological texts, anomalous archaeological artifacts, and controversial geological dating. It is a theory built on circumstantial evidence and intriguing correlations, not on the solid foundation of excavated cities and deciphered texts that mainstream archaeology requires. However, its proponents argue that the evidence has been destroyed by rising seas, by millennia of sedimentation, and by the fragility of the material culture itself. They point to enigmatic sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a massive, sophisticated temple complex dated to 9,600 BCE, which itself upends the traditional timeline of civilization, as proof that our understanding of the Neolithic is fundamentally flawed. Göbekli Tepe shows that complex, organized societies capable of monumental architecture existed thousands of years earlier than previously believed. The lost civilization theory asks us to take this logic one step further, to consider that Göbekli Tepe might not be the beginning, but itself a legacy of an even older, more advanced world, a world whose greatest and most enduring monument may be the silent, enigmatic pyramids of the Giza plateau. The Great Pyramid may represent a functional technology of a kind we are only beginning to understand, a machine designed to generate, harness, and transmit energy by tapping into the natural forces of the Earth and the cosmos. This is perhaps the most radical of all the alternative theories, one that moves the pyramid from the realm of ancient archaeology into the sphere of advanced physics and engineering. Proposed by authors like Christopher Dunn in his book, The Giza Power Plant, this hypothesis suggests that the Great Pyramid was a sophisticated, resonant device that converted seismic and acoustic vibration into electromagnetic energy. It is a theory that views the pyramid's every detail, its materials, its internal chambers, its shaft alignments, even its missing capstone, not as symbolic or funerary features, but as functional components of a colossal power generator, a technology so advanced we are only now rediscovering its principles. The foundation of this theory lies in the piezoelectric properties of the pyramid's primary construction material, granite. Granite is a quartz-rich rock, and quartz is a piezoelectric crystal. This means that when it is subjected to mechanical stress or vibration, it generates an electrical charge. The King's Chamber, the heart of this proposed power plant, is built entirely from massive granite blocks. The theory posits that the subtle, constant seismic vibrations of the Earth, its microseismic background hum, would have been transmitted up through the pyramid structure, setting the granite blocks in the King's Chamber into a state of constant, subtle vibration. This mechanical stress would have caused the quartz crystals within the granite to generate a small electrical current. The chamber itself, with its precisely dimensioned and resonating properties, would have amplified this effect, turning the entire room into a powerful, oscillating energy source, a concept that transforms the pyramid from a static monument into a dynamic, vibrating entity. But how is this energy collected and transmitted? This is where the other architectural features of the pyramid come into play. The so-called sarcophagus in the King's Chamber is not a coffin, but a resonant box, a feedback mechanism designed to tune and amplify the specific vibrational frequencies within the chamber. It is made of the same piezoelectric granite and is precisely shaped to enhance these acoustic and vibrational properties. The air shafts leading from the King's and Queen's chambers are then reimagined as waveguides. Rather than pointing at stars for symbolic reasons, they were tuned like organ pipes to specific resonant frequencies. They may have been used to channel sound waves into the chambers to stimulate the granite, or to transmit the resulting electromagnetic energy out of the pyramid. The Queen's Chamber, with its niche and corbelled walls, is theorized to have been a reaction chamber where a hydrogen-producing chemical process took place, perhaps involving hydrated zinc and a catalyst, with the hydrogen gas then being channeled through the shafts to be ignited or used in the energy generation process, adding a layer of chemical engineering to the device's function. The Great Gallery, that magnificent, corbelled ascending passage, is seen as the machine's most sophisticated component, a resonant sound amplifier. Its complex, narrowing shape is acoustically perfect for collecting and focusing sound waves from the subterranean chamber below and directing them upwards into the King's Chamber. The theory suggests that the pyramid was tuned to the fundamental resonant frequency of the Earth itself, around 8 Hz, known as the Schumann resonance. By vibrating in harmony with the planet, the pyramid could draw upon a virtually limitless source of ambient seismic and acoustic energy. The missing, Polished Tural limestone casing stones were not just for appearance. Their flat, highly insulating properties would have prevented the energy from dissipating into the atmosphere, reflecting vibrations back into the core of the structure and creating a contained, resonant system. The gold or electrum capstone that once crowned the pyramid would have acted as a massive, conductive terminal, ionizing the air around it and allowing the generated energy to be broadcast wirelessly into the atmosphere, a form of wireless power transmission that seems impossibly advanced for antiquity. Critics of this theory are numerous and vocal. They point out the complete lack of any electrical components, wiring, or conductors within the pyramid. They argue that the energy produced by such a system would be minuscule, far less than the theoretical energy required to build the structure in the first place. They see the interpretation of the pyramid's features as purely speculative, forcing a modern technological framework onto an ancient, pre-scientific culture. Mainstream Egyptology dismisses it outright as pseudoscience. However, proponents counter that our understanding of ancient technology is limited by our own paradigms. We expect to find wires and gears, but advanced technology might not look like that. They point to anomalous evidence, such as the absence of soot from torches in the interior chambers, suggesting an alternative form of lighting was used. They also note that many of the pyramid's unique features, the precise geometry, the specific materials, the complex internal passages, are perfectly explained by this functional model, whereas the tomb theory leaves many of them as inexplicable anomalies. Whether a fanciful speculation or a glimpse of a forgotten science, the power plant hypothesis forces us to look at the Great Pyramid not as a static monument, but as a dynamic, functioning device, a machine of stone that may have once hummed with a power we can scarcely imagine, its purpose as lost to history as the civilization that designed it. As we conclude this part of our journey into the mysteries of Giza, we'd like to extend a special thank you for listening. If you're finding comfort in these ancient explorations, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Slumber Expeditions. We would also love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to connect with our global community of curious minds. You can also share which part of the story has captivated you the most so far. It would be wonderful to start a conversation around it. Now, let the mystery of what we've uncovered so far settle in your mind as we prepare to continue our exploration. The most compelling evidence for a lost builder of the pyramids may not be what we have found, but what we have not. The silence of the archaeological record, the stunning lack of definitive plans, engineering drawings, tool marks, and administrative records detailing the construction of the Giza complex is not necessarily an accident of preservation, but may be a profound clue in itself. Mainstream Egyptology points to the workers' villages, the quarries, and a handful of papyrus fragments mentioning the transportation of limestone as proof of a state-sponsored project. Yet, when we compare this to the evidence for other, less ambitious Egyptian construction projects, the disparity is jarring. For a project of such unimaginable scale, complexity, and duration, the documentary and physical evidence is astonishingly, suspiciously thin. This void forces us to consider a radical possibility that the evidence is missing because the culture that built the core structures operated in a way that left little trace, or that their records were rendered in a medium we cannot decipher or have not considered, or that they were deliberately expunged by later cultures who appropriated the sites. Consider the logistics of the Great Pyramid's construction. We are asked to believe that a society managed a 20-year project involving tens of thousands of workers, the quarrying of millions of stones, the invention of complex ramp systems, and the precision engineering of interior chambers, all without leaving behind a single detailed architectural plan. The Egyptians were meticulous record keepers. We have extensive papyri detailing tax records, religious texts, medical procedures, and accounts of much smaller building projects. For the pyramids, we have nothing comparable. The famous Diary of Mirror papyri, often cited as evidence, document the transportation of Tural limestone casing stones for the final phases of the Great Pyramid's construction. This is crucial, but it only speaks to the final dressing of the monument, not its core design and construction. It proves the Egyptians were finishing the pyramid, not that they were the original architects of its revolutionary design. The absence of core engineering documents suggests that the knowledge was either so sacred it was never committed to a perishable medium, or that it was not their knowledge to record in the first place, a knowledge that was applied rather than invented. This silence extends to the tools and technologies required for the most sophisticated work. As discussed, the working of Aswan granite to machine-grade tolerances with copper tools is a practical impossibility. Where are the advanced tools? Where are the diamond-tipped drill bits, the saws with jeweled teeth, the lathes for turning the massive granite sarcophagi? The orthodox explanation is that they used abrasive sand with simple copper saws and tube drills. Yet, the evidence on the stones themselves suggests a feed rate and cutting power inconsistent with this slow, laborious method. The core drill hole in a granite block at the Temple of Karnak shows a drill that advanced into the rock at a rate consistent with the modern power drill, implying immense, sustained pressure. If such a technology existed, its components are entirely missing from the archaeological record. This is the ghost technology, evidenced brilliantly by its products, but leaving no trace of its mechanisms. It suggests a technology that was either purposefully removed from history or one that was based on principles we do not yet understand, perhaps utilizing harmonic resonance or other forms of energy manipulation that leave no physical tool behind. Furthermore, the cultural and religious context of the Fourth Dynasty shows no clear evolution toward the pyramid form that explains its sudden, perfect appearance. The step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara is a revolutionary leap from the simple mastaba tomb, but it is a complex of stacked, smaller structures. The transition from this to the geometrically perfect, smooth-sided true pyramid happens with the Midim pyramid and the bent pyramid at Dashur, which are architectural failures, showing clear evidence of engineering miscalculations and structural instability. Then, suddenly, with no intermediate steps, the Great Pyramid appears flawless, colossal, and perfect. This is not a normal technological evolution, it is a quantum leap. It is as if, after struggling with the basic concepts, the builders suddenly received a finished blueprint from a master engineer and executed it perfectly. This pattern is more consistent with the adoption and implementation of a pre-existing, sophisticated design than with the organic, trial-and-error development of a new architectural form, a pattern of implementation rather than innovation. The most profound silence, however, is the lack of any clear statement of purpose from the builders themselves. The interiors of the Giza pyramids are devoid of the hieroglyphic inscriptions that cover later tombs in the Valley of the Kings. If these were the ultimate expressions of pharaonic power and the central focus of a state religion, why are they silent? The walls are blank. The only markings are the controversial quarry marks in the relieving chambers. This silence is deafening. It suggests that the purpose of the structures was so self-evident to the culture that built them that it needed no explanation, or that their function was of such a nature that it could not be, or should not be, described in a symbolic language. If the pyramids were functional devices, astronomical observatories, energy generators, or geodetic markers, their operation would be their statement. The later Egyptians who used them as part of a funerary cult would have added their own layers of meaning and infrastructure, the mortuary temples, causeways, and boat pits, without necessarily understanding or needing to explain the original core function of the primary structures. The silence, therefore, is not an empty void, but a space filled with questions, pointing toward an origin story for Giza that is far older, more sophisticated, and more enigmatic than the traditional narrative allows. The greatest obstacle to solving the mystery of the pyramids may not be a lack of evidence, but a deeply ingrained resistance within ourselves. Our own psychological and academic frameworks can prevent us from accepting a narrative that fundamentally challenges the established story of human progress. The debate over the pyramids is not merely a scholarly dispute, it is a clash of paradigms, a battle between a comfortable, linear view of history and a disruptive, cyclical one that admits the possibility of lost epochs of high achievement. The orthodox Egyptological model fits neatly into the Western narrative of civilization's steady ascent from primitive origins in Mesopotamia and Egypt to the modern world. To suggest that a sophisticated culture predated these cradles of civilization is to pull the rug out from under a foundational pillar of history, archaeology, and even our cultural identity. This creates a powerful cognitive bias, an institutional inertia that defends the status quo with often surprising ferocity. This resistance operates on several levels. At its core is what philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn called a paradigm. Normal science operates within a dominant paradigm, solving puzzles that the paradigm defines. The standard chronology of ancient Egypt is such a paradigm. It is a self-consistent, interlocking system of king lists, pottery sequences, and carbon dates. Evidence that fits is incorporated. Evidence that challenges it is often dismissed, ignored, or explained away with increasingly complex ad hoc hypotheses. The water erosion on the Sphinx is explained by salt exfoliation or rare heavy rains. The precision of the stonework is attributed to unknown but plausible methods using simple tools. The lack of evidence for ramps is hand-waved away by suggesting they were completely dismantled. This is not necessarily intellectual dishonesty, it is the natural defense mechanism of an established system of knowledge. To accept the water erosion hypothesis, for example, would require not just redating the Sphinx, but dismantling the entire chronological framework of the Old Kingdom, a task so monumental that it is easier for most Egyptologists to dismiss the geological evidence outright. There is also a profound sociological dimension to this resistance. Academia is a hierarchy built on reputation, peer review, and the gradual accumulation of knowledge within accepted boundaries. Egyptologists have spent their entire careers building expertise within the standard model. Their textbooks, their university courses, their public reputations are all invested in it. For an outsider, a geologist, an engineer, an amateur enthusiast, to come along and claim that the foundation of their life's work is fundamentally flawed is not just an academic challenge, it is a personal and professional threat. This leads to the common tactic of argumentum ad hominem, dismissing the messenger rather than engaging with the message. Alternative theorists are often labeled as pseudoscientists, fantasists, or worse, their credentials and motives questioned as a way to discredit their evidence without having to grapple with its uncomfortable implications. The gatekeeping of institutions and academic journals ensures that heterodox views rarely get a fair hearing in the mainstream, creating a closed loop of self-reinforcing consensus. Our own modern technological arrogance also plays a role. We live in an age of silicon, steel, and electricity. We assume that advanced technology must look like our own. The idea that an ancient culture could achieve similar or superior results using a completely different technological path, one based on a deep understanding of harmonic resonance, geomancy, and the properties of stone, is difficult for the modern mind to accept. We look for cranes and power tools, We do not consider the possibility that they might have used sound, water, or manipulated gravitational fields. This signature of the familiar blinds us to other possibilities. The pyramid's design doesn't look like anything we would build as a tomb, or a temple, or a power plant, so we force it into the category we understand best, even if it is a poor fit. We project our own cultural values and technological understanding onto the past, unable to conceive of a science that was not based on combustion and electronics, but on vibration and geometry, a science of stone and sky. Finally, there is a deep-seated, almost existential discomfort with the idea of lost civilizations. This standard model of history provides us with a comforting sense of progress and superiority. We are the pinnacle. To entertain the notion that a great culture rose and fell in prehistory, leaving only the most durable of its creations behind, is to confront the fragility of our own civilization. It suggests that progress is not linear and inevitable, but cyclical and prone to collapse. It implies that our own technological edifice could one day be nothing but a mystery for future civilization to ponder. This is a terrifying thought. It is far more comforting to believe that the pyramids are the impressive but ultimately understandable products of a known, historical culture, the ancient Egyptians, than to face the possibility that they are the enigmatic legacy of a people whose name and fate are utterly lost, a silent warning from the deep past about the transience of human achievement. Our attachment to the known story of the pyramids is, therefore, not just an academic position, it is a psychological bulwark against a much more complex and humbling view of human history. The true purpose of the Giza pyramids may be ultimately unknowable. After all our scientific analysis, our theoretical models, and our passionate debates, we must finally make peace with the fact that these structures will forever guard their deepest secrets. As our long journey through the evidence and the theories draws to a close, we are left not with a definitive answer, but with a deepened sense of awe and a profound respect for the mystery itself. The Great Pyramid and its companions defy categorization. They are too precise to be mere tombs, too colossal to be simple symbols, and too complex in their architecture to be the product of a straightforward, single-purpose design. They stand as a permanent question mark at the dawn of history, challenging our arrogance, our assumptions, and our understanding of our own past. To stand before them is to feel the weight of deep time and the whisper of a forgotten intelligence, a humbling experience that puts our own knowledge into perspective. Perhaps the most valuable lesson of the pyramid mystery is that it forces us to hold multiple possibilities in our mind at once. The orthodox narrative, for all its flaws, provides a coherent, evidence-based framework that cannot be dismissed out of hand. The workers' villages, the quarry marks, the funerary temples, they all point to a deep Egyptian involvement with the site. Yet, the alternative theories, the geological dating of the Sphinx, the astronomical alignments to 10,500 BCE, the evidence of advanced stoneworking, present a body of anomalies that the standard model cannot comfortably digest. The truth may not be a simple choice between Egyptians and Atlanteans. It may be a more complex, layered history. Perhaps the Giza Plateau was indeed a sacred site of immense antiquity, its core structures built by a now-vanished precursor culture during the wet Sahara period. The Old Kingdom Egyptians, emerging as a powerful state, then discovered these colossal, enigmatic ruins. Recognizing their power and sanctity, they adopted the site, studied its alignments, and sought to integrate it into their own cosmology. They finished the structures, added the casing stones, built the temples and causeways, and began using them as the focal point for their royal burial cults, thus becoming the inheritors and custodians of a legacy they themselves did not fully create, but brilliantly repurposed. This synthesis allows the evidence from both sides to find a home. It explains the water erosion on the Sphinx and the older astronomical alignments. It accounts for the sudden appearance of flawless engineering in the Fourth Dynasty. They were not inventing it, they were executing a perfected, inherited design on a scale they could manage with their vast state resources. It explains why the pyramid interiors are devoid of hieroglyphs. The original structures were functional, not symbolic, and the Egyptians respected that silence. It also explains why the knowledge was lost. It was never fully theirs to begin with. The peak and decline of pyramid building quality reflects not a loss of native Egyptian knowledge, but the gradual exhaustion of the inherited technical tradition from the precursor civilization. The later pyramids are the attempts of the Egyptians to emulate the masters, using their own, more limited understanding, a pattern seen throughout history when a later culture tries to replicate the achievements of a more advanced predecessor. For you, the listener, now settling into a state of deep relaxation, let the mystery of the pyramids be a source of wonder, not frustration. Let your mind wander through the vast, silent galleries of the Great Pyramid, not in search of a single, definitive answer, but in appreciation of the grandeur of the question itself. Imagine the countless possibilities, the pyramid as a resonant chamber humming with energy, as a telescope pointing to the belt of Orion, as a testament to a king's journey to the stars, or as a warning from a lost world. There is a profound peace to be found in the acceptance of mystery, in the recognition that some stones are too heavy for our theories to lift. The pyramids do not need our answers to validate their existence. They simply are enduring monuments to a past we can only partially glimpse. The enduring enigma of Giza is a gift. It is a perpetual catalyst for curiosity, a monument that refuses to be confined to the pages of a history book. It invites us to question, to explore, to dream. It reminds us that our past is likely far richer, more strange, and more wonderful than we have been taught. The final truth of the pyramids may be that their greatest function is not to house the dead, or to generate power, or to map the stars, but to awaken in us a sense of profound wonder about our world and our place in its long, forgotten history. They are a mirror reflecting our own desire to understand, and in their silent, majestic presence, we see the reflection of our own endless curiosity, a curiosity that is the true engine of all discovery. Thank you for joining us on this slumber expedition into the heart of one of history's greatest mysteries. May the quiet enigma of the stones and the vastness of the deep past guide you into a peaceful and restorative sleep. Good night.